This is a video I've been working at, pondering for quite a while. I'll be honest with you, it's intimidating. What I've been able to find is that, as far as I'm concerned, it looks like Genesis is made in two parts. We can isolate the two parts. And there's a numbering grid in the background that I can show you using the computer that's going to demonstrate that it looks like Genesis is a derivative of the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish. But we have to get into the numbering patterns to see this. You can't just say that or listen to me say that. It's going to take a while to get into this material. My name is Dan Paulson. I'm an independent researcher, and I've been working on this for a long time. And I think I have finally cracked into something that is demonstrable. However, the reason it is so difficult is because it is at such a deep level that, quite honestly, we're looking at these stories in paper and we think we know them. In antiquity, they had them memorized so deeply that they even knew how many times names, all the nouns and verbs in the story were repeated, because there's a numbering grid in there that's going to lead to something. We have lost that. I'm looking to find that. Okay, the purpose of this video, let's see if I can nail this down. And it's going to be rough. You need to help me out here. This is totally new stuff. I don't know what to do with it. I should add this in. If you haven't followed my work, this is something you're not going to have heard before. It's going to be very unique and very different. What I'm going to contend is that the Bible, like many other things from antiquity, is created on a template that is a human life template, and that there's a healing path in there. And the purpose of this is to find that healing path and, see where it all comes from. What are the masters from antiquity sending forward to us? All right, let me just start throwing some things at you. We have to learn some stuff, so let's put it on the table here. All right, I hope this is what we're in for. Genesis, the second deep dive on this video. This will be an ongoing series due to the sheer volume of material and layers of interpretation to first learn and then to navigate. And cross-reference and everything. Yeah, it's going to be big. I've got to tell you, it's not an easy thing. It really isn't. It's huge. And that's why we can't see it. We can't wrap our heads around it. But if we see what it is, I think we easily can. Okay, my intended goals in this video series is a complete template analysis of Genesis. These are going to be kind of the general topics. First, a general overview of Genesis, the source of chapters and the verses, how the chapters work. I'll manage the interpretation at the level of template only. This means that every word needs to be interpreted. The story all plays out in one's mind, and the people and places in the story are really deep ways of representing us and our life at various times, at various stages, and various facets. The story is going to sequence in an observable pattern for those who can read conceptually. And I'm going to show you some examples of conceptual reading from a simple verse. I'm going to make an example of a common element that we're going to find in the stories, cyclical pain. This is a part of every one of the stories. Cyclical pain is in there, or some sort of idea that if you judge something, you're going to continue to see the repercussions of it. Okay, let's throw out a couple of examples here. I've got some homemade verses here. An anchored ship cannot sail, and the tide full cannot escape. Okay, what do we have going on is something that's actually pretty simple. What we at some point in time have learned that as long as we're hanging on to something, we can't escape it. Mentally, this happened. As long as I'm holding on to that, I can't escape it. I have to forgive. I have to do something. So you put that in the population. You have to forgive people who hurt you if you want to escape it. And they go, no way, I'm not doing that. They hurt me. I'm the victim here. I'm not doing that. So they will continue to live their life. The ones that decide I need to turn inward, they understand that this verse is a component part of them. The verse is made in such a way that I'm just going to create an analog. As long as I'm hanging on to something, I can't escape. As long as the ship is anchored, it can't sail. As long as the foal is tied, it can't escape. I'm the ship. I'm the foal. Whatever they're tied onto is anchored to. So that's how they create the analogs. The same thing would happen if you go to Lao Tzu's work and who makes the jar. We live life creating a jar, but it's the inside that gives it its value. We live life creating ourselves, but what is inside of us is what gives it the value. We do the same thing with Jesus' work. You're the wineskin, and the wine is life. You are the cup that needs to be washed inside and out, all of those things. So this particular style of verse right here works like that. Now, that is how everything is going to get interpreted at deeper and deeper layers, though. This is really just barely touching the surface so far. All right, what I want to do here is talk you through a really kind of a simple verbal encoding process that they're using. This isn't exactly what they're doing. This is so simple that we can do it and we can see how it is. This is how you encode while you're putting something in the words using numbers. It's pretty simple. Let's say you and I needed to meet up. I needed to get you a message, but it was secret. Some kind of danger. But the only way to get you the message is through a runner. People are going to know this message. They're going to hear it. It's not private. So I need to get you a message that's known by everybody, that isn't understood by everyone. So in its simplest form, I could say something like, I need to meet you on 7th Street. We need to have lunch down there. It's been a while. It's been a long time since I've been to 7th Street. Anyway, yeah, get there as soon as you can. I'll see you when you get to 7th Street. And that's the message. You know that because I said 7th Street 3 times, that I mean 3rd Street. That's how sneaky it is, okay? But how easy it is. However, it gets so thick and so big. How many times is Noah's name said? 41 times. Sarai's, 17. There's a point where this is really huge. What I said right there was super simple. Okay, so the whole thing is easy. It's just deep. It's a lot. You almost have to live doing it. Okay, what else do I have here? 2 or more styles of writing show the 2 different creation variations and writing style and what they are doing, plus the strange verbal stitching job. Yeah, that's what I call it. There's a variant numbering style difference. Show the connection between Genesis and the Enuma Elish. These seem to show Genesis comes from a minimum of 2 sources. I didn't even finish that, did I? Okay, so, all right, I'm going to say this, and boy, it's going to be a tough one for some people, all right? It looks to me like that the creation myth, the Enuma Elish, there's patterns in there that are easily replicated in Genesis, in certain parts of Genesis. You have to see Genesis as a couple of things. The writing styles are going to help us reveal that. We go look at that, we get there, it'll open up for us. Okay, so what it's looking like though is that Enuma Elish is first. It's older. It's coming from Babylonia. But if you look, you begin to see some patterned things in there. And there's a name repeating amount in there that adds up to a very certain specific amount. We're going to get into that. It's going to sound very bizarre until we get into it. In fact, if it seems far-fetched, just think of it this way to begin with. This is a story that is encoded. How is it encoded? If it's not history, and if it's not completely just made up fallacy, if it's purposeful and there's something encoded in it and you can see patterns in there and numbering patterns, that's what we're going after. But it is deep. The numbering pattern is something I didn't see to begin with. The numbering pattern is something that I found in Genesis because Genesis has numbering patterns in there. There's what I call analog farms, lineages of these numbers, that 800, 900, 678, all those sort of things. Okay, those are like places where we're going to stop and pick up code. That's very highly encoded pieces right there. And from those encoded pieces, some numbers begin to derive that are being used to help repeat some sequences in the background and to identify what analogs are. And when you figure that out and then you come back up to the Enuma Elish and look at it, I see that numbering pattern here. I don't know where it came from. I find it in Genesis, but if it's in the Enuma Elish, then it came from the Babylonians and something that isn't in the Enuma Elish. The pattern is there. And we're going to get into that. I'll show you what that is as we get into it. The numbering pattern is a goofy thing. Just stick with me on this. I'm going to show you numbers that are so repetitive, what's going on, that you're going to go, yeah, there's something structured in there, that is not an accident. Even if you don't know what it is, you're going to go, what's going on? That is weird. Okay, let me bring up my copy of Genesis and see if we can start navigating this. Oh, let me say to start, I'm going to be using the NRSV for reading, for interpretation here. I'm going to be doing some word counts, but when I do word counts, I'm going to be using the King James Version. Right here for this reading, I'm just going to be using the NRSV to kind of pull out some of the Old English sound for people. I don't prefer it myself. Sometimes I think I'm good at it, and then I hear other people and I go, oh, yeah, try to plain language. I want to understand what that means. if there's double negatives or this, if not this, then, that sort of thing. I want to stop and unwrap those so I know what they mean. All right, I want to talk about the chapters and verses that are in the Bible. We need to understand some structural things going on, but it's really important because there's something that is in the numbering system that we need to be paying attention to. There's something in here that's guiding us. There's times where you look at the verse numbering, for example, and you'll notice, well, it's not. Why would he sometimes make it one sentence and then the next sentence and then the next sentence and then start breaking it up mid-sentence and making it short and doing goofy things and some parts are long? It's not consistent in the way that he's breaking up these sentences. So you would wonder why that is, and there is a reason for it. But we're going to get there. It's still pretty deep. I'm using the NRSV right here, but before we get into that, I'm going to read this. I just downloaded this from the internet. When the books of the Bible were originally written, they did not contain chapter or verse references. Yeah, when you heard Genesis as a kid 3,500 years ago, it did not start off chapter 1, verse 1, and it just started off as a story. There were no chapters or verses. You just heard the story. The Bible was divided into chapters and verses to help us find scriptures more quickly and easily. It is much easier to find John chapter 3, verse 16, for example, than it is to find for God so loved the world. In a few places, chapter breaks are poorly placed and as a result divide content that should flow together. Okay, look at that right there. Yeah, there's some interesting things going on in here. Overall, the chapter and verse divisions are very helpful. The chapter divisions commonly used today were developed by Stephen Langton, an Archbishop of Canterbury. Langton put the modern chapter divisions into place around 1227 AD. The Wycliffe English Bible of 1382 was the first Bible to use this chapter pattern. Since the Wycliffe Bible, nearly all Bible translations have followed Langton's chapter divisions. Okay, this is not going to be this isn't history or anything like that. This is all important stuff because there is something that is held in the numbering pattern in the background that is also replicated in the chapter and the verses numbering sequence. So it's really important to say that they are numbering in certain places for certain reasons. Now, if we get down in here into the first creation story, what I want to do is show you one of the very first overlap issues. What did he say here? In a few places, chapter breaks are poorly placed. As a result, divide content that should flow together. All right, right off the bat, right between the first and the second creation story. He's got it divided right after the sixth day. He's got chapter 2 starting before God rested, before the seventh day was done. So his starts off, thus the heavens and the earth were finished in all their multitude. And on the seventh day, God finished the work that he had done in rest. And all of this is in chapter 2. When all reality, the six-day creation and then the 7-day rest is all one style. And then if you jump down here, it starts a second creation story. It's at verse 4. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord made the earth and the heavens. When no plant of the field was yet in the earth, and no herb of the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not called. Okay, so I don't have to keep reading. We're going to go on here. This is one of those places where you can see, look at down here, number 8. And the Lord God, it goes, oh, there's a complete sentence. What about up here? But a stream would rise from the earth and water the whole face of the ground. Then the Lord, how come see how that's broken up like that? These are things that are going to be purposeful. They're hard to spot. They're really hard. I'm not going to cover that right now. We're going to grow into that. Okay, so that we have that overlap. Now, what I want to talk about is style differences. In the first chapter story, it reads to me almost electronic, like I'm reading a programming in some ways. This is very hard to see in the background. You'd have to. I see what almost appears to be if-then statements. Here we have one. And God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome, and it was so. So you have this, let there be, and it was so. Let there be, and it was so. Let there be, and it was so. It reads like that. When you get down to the second creation story, it is not that style at all. It does not read that way. It's almost like you went from a programming manual to Yeah, we went from basic programming class. Now we went down the hall and we're going into poetry class. It doesn't do that. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being. And the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east. You see, it's not doing that same technique up here of and God said, and it was so, and God said, and it was so, and God said. So right there you can see that between the two creation stories, not only are they different style, but they're also broken up they're overlapped in an odd place. I'm not sure why he did that, but I can assure you Langton knew what he was doing if you go through here. So that's either to get our attention or to try to hide that you just went from one style to another. If you start reading in chapter 2, where chapter 7 is still there, it starts right off, and on the seventh day, I mean, it still has that kind of, and on the seventh, and so blessed that it has that kind of a feel to it. It kind of transitions the sound of it. But it's still obvious. I mean, people know this. Everybody knows that. Yeah, there's two creation stories. Okay, what have we got our teeth sunk into? You had an idea what I'm going to do and whatnot. We see where the chapters and verses come from. We see that I see a couple style differences there. Now what I'm going to do is go through and try something a little bit more. What I've said is that in those style differences, I believe that they were added in later, that the original style was that smooth style, the one that's added in later, the first creation. That was added in later, but there's also things that disrupt that kind of flow as you go through here. And what they are is lineages. Like the first thing you jump into is an Adam's lineage. I call it an Adam's analog farm. It's an odd numbering chunk right here about people, living 912 and had so-and-so and then died. And it's a whole weird pattern of numbers right there that looks, people use that as the lineage of life. That's that's how life happened and whatnot. Okay, what they're doing right there is in a numbering pattern that is, we're going to go work on that. They're developing more numbers right there. If you look right up here in the creation story, let me back up a little bit. What was there? There was 7 said 3 times. Remember our story right there. In this case, they're not doing the same thing. They're combining both numbers. By saying 7 3 times, they've made 7 and 3 the same location right there. But what does that mean? It's parallel to the other creation story. If they were side by side, 7 and 3 represents the same place that we would be naked, unashamed in the Garden of Eden before first sin. So, naked, unashamed in the Garden of Eden, 7-3 grid, it all starts right there. Now, what we're going to do is just go through and gather numbers, and what you'll see at some point is that it's so consistent that you go, yeah, that's got to be it. That's got to be it. You don't have to make this up. You're going to look at things, and if you reason through why they're doing this, I can't come up with any other reason than to say they're replicating a healing pattern in the background, but they're hiding it in the numbers. So this is what's bizarre then, remembering this. 3 does not mean 3, ever. 7 does not mean 7, ever, in the Bible. What they mean is pure state, naked, unashamed, in the garden. Okay? The other numbers we gather up are going to be the same thing. Then they're going to be given days, years, all kinds of different things. Those are just superfluous details. What we're looking for is the numbers. The code is in the numbers. Okay, I want to talk in general terms again here as we get into it. Just step back and think about this. This is what I'm saying up front, and then we're going to go look at it to see if it measures up, okay? But let's a big statement up front. This is what I think I see happening. That from creation to chapter 6 in the Bible, where the earth needs to be destroyed, represents the cycle of a human being. The normal life cycle of a human being that gets hurt but never turns inward. The world is out of control, except that it doesn't get destroyed. I should have mentioned right up front, creation is the creation of each person. This is not the creation of the world or the universe or anything like that. This is the creation of me. This has to play out in here. At first, I'm really nothing, and then I start growing and developing, and what happens? Life goes on. We're going to see, if we treat the verse that way, it's not going to be supernatural. It's going to be something that provides mentally interactive steps that teach us how we came about and how we heal in a very guru fashion. When chapter 7 starts, 7-3 grid, pure state. When chapter 7 starts, it's time for the flood. We're going to purify. We're going to do it for 40 days and 40 nights. We're going to start gathering up other numbers here using the 7 to do so. But what we have going on right there is the start of the second template. The first template is everybody, you live this life. If you're hurt, there may be people that don't make it there. There are people that have good lives that they don't need to make this path. But at chapter 7, when Noah is called, that is when the self-healing path begins. I would become Noah, or you would become Noah, and the idea is to emerge on the other side of the purging of our world. This is my world, metaphorically. It's not a physical happening. It's a psychological happening. It's happening in the experience of my own life. The world that needs to be destroyed is the world that I see, that I view, that I come from, that I'm holding with me, that is hurting me along the way. That's the field that needs to be, or the world that needs to be wiped out. And then what happened when when Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden after first sin? They got covered up. That represents in the spiritual realm, now I have something to hide. I'm covered up over something. I've got a wall up somewhere. I don't want you to know something. I've got things that I don't. Yeah. All right. Then what happens after the flood? Noah is naked. This is us stripping it off afterwards. We get covered up again. Okay. So the interpretation is going to go that way. But here's what I want you to look at. If you were to go read, and I'll get into more detail here, but if you go to read the story about the flood, you will see that there's 2 separate callings of Noah. Actually, let me bring it up and show you right here. This is where the flood is we're getting ready for the flood right here. There's the calling going on. This is in chapter 6 right here. We're being told where God is talking to Noah and telling him what to do. And he's telling him how to, a window you shall make into the ark, with a cubit thou shalt make it. We go down here, but with you I shall establish my covenant, and you shall come into the ark, and you and your wife and sons with him. And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort you shall bring into the ark to keep with them alive with you. And they shall be male and female, of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of their kind after his kind. 2 of every sort shall come to you and keep them alive. Then, as we get into chapter 7, we have something that sounds different. Of every clean beast, you shall take unto you 7, the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean, 2 by 2, male and female, of fowls of the air, of the 7s, male and female, to keep the seed alive upon the face of the earth. So we see that there's 2 different sounding callings right there, and this is right where the flood is starting. This is where the next step in the sequence would be. If you go on the path to start self-healing, this is where it begins, right there at the calling of Noah. You become Noah and you go in and flood the earth, your earth. Okay, so you can see that at the beginning of both of those templates, there's additions in that match up using a number sequence. They're passing along a pattern. That 7 and that 7 match. There's something happening that has to go in the pattern. That's why that's there. It's a stitching job. There was an old Genesis that didn't have that 7-3 grid. It went without that. It went with something different, a little more rudimentary. All right, I wonder if anybody's still with me. Okay. All right, I've got some numbers that we're going to gather from the analog farm. It's important to kind of jump ahead and do a couple of things. What I'm going to do is show you how the numbers are being grabbed up. First of all, the 7 is going to be used in some ways to go out and gather up other numbers. It doesn't look like it, but we're going to find it. Like, let's go right down to the atom analog grid, and I'm going to show you how they're doing it, how they're using the numbers to grab other numbers in a way that's deeper than that little example that I gave you of the repeat. Watch what they're doing that takes it to the next level. All right, very quick, I'm just going to show you that this is going to be something in greater detail on a future video. I'm going to start going through just Genesis interpretation. But right now, this is just to show you how they're grabbing more numbers. If I was to come down here to this analog farm, or what I call an analog farm, what it really is a lineage. All the days of Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. And Seth lived 105 years, and he begat Enos. And Seth lived after he begat Enos 807 years and begat sons and daughters. So this whole kind of a numbering thing goes along, which is this time lineage is what it sounds like. but it doesn't make sense. And people try to by, whatever, the water was over holding the earth. People used to live longer, something like that. But if you start looking at numbers in a different way, one thing that I decided one time is I look at it in the King James Version, is it no longer looks like a 930 or 807 or a 912 right there. It looks like the number 900 and the number 30. And it looks like the number 800 and the number 7. And it looks like number 900 and the number 12. So I'm looking at it in a different way, going, you know what? All of those numbers, that 30, that 7, that 12, that 15, that 5, that 40, the 10, 70, where do I keep seeing those show up? And what is the 900 doing there? What is the 800 doing there? All right, well, let's go take a look at something. How many times does 900 show up? Bingo. You see what they're doing? They put it back, they put it in another layer. We're going to take 900, repeat it 7 times, and by default, it became a 7. With the power of a 7, it is now being able to grab a 30 and a 7 and a 12 and a 15 and a 5 and a 40 and a 10 and put them all in that 3-7 pile. We've got more down here, 30s. So I'm not going to go through all of this. We can continue to cross-reference this. Watch if we went to Sodom. Okay, so we have this spot down here where all of a sudden it sounds odd, where Abraham stood before the Lord and Abraham drew hear him and started asking him about the destruction of Sodom. Well, what if there's 50 righteous in the city? Will you destroy it and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are there? He says, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I'll spare it for them and the place for their sakes. And he goes on, what do we have? We have 50 being, well, first of all, what do we do with these numbers? Righteous is being repeated an awful lot here. The righteous with the wicked, righteous, righteous, righteous. You look for repeats. Okay, how many times is righteous? Righteous is said 12 times total, which is one of our numbers, isn't it? Yep, it is. Oh, actually, righteousness, that's okay. Down here, what do we have in this story where Abraham is talking to God? Righteous is said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And the numbers are all what? 50, 40, 30, 5. All of the numbers that we've been gathering up at the other one are also appearing here, but they're doing so being pointed to by something that you can see that they're just taking words and repeating them a certain amount of time, which gives them weights. They're aiming with repeats. It was their code. It was their ancient, it's the 3,500-year-old code. How they're putting it into the story. What do we do with it? Right now, like I said, we're going to gather that up later. That was not complete. That was just a quick thing to show what they're doing. Now, I fully understand this is just like probably a really big confusing data dump. And it is. This is like an accumulation of things for like years of grabbing little bits and pieces here that finally fit together. And you would have to do that unless I do a data dump like this. So yeah, I know it's all there. Now the numbers are going to do things like anything that's a 7, for example. With that 7 there, that means pure state. If I go down into, in fact, here, let me just show you. This is the King James Version of the Bible again. Let's say there's wine. Wine is used here in Genesis. What if I wanted to know if wine was a good thing or not? Now I'm going to search this, but bear in mind, if they had it memorized so much that they lived through this, they knew how many times words were repeated. Wine. 12 times. 12 is one of our numbers. What that tells us, that wine is a good thing. This means pure state. Wine is a new way to feel in the spiritual world. It's not something you're drinking in the physical world. This is a spiritual thing. If I consume wine, what is changing an old wineskin to put new wine into? I'm the wineskin. The wine represents life. So when you're drinking wine here, you're drinking new life, and this is a good thing. That's how they're using the numbers. Let's grab another one. What do we have here? Let's do nakedness, because that's when that was after the 5 times. That's one of that right there, nakedness in Genesis being said 5 times. That's one of the numbers that we gathered up in that pool. That means it's a good thing. So as we're translating this, We know now that nakedness does not mean in the physical world I took my clothes off. This means in the spiritual world I've uncovered from whatever it was, my shame, my pain, my hurt. Okay, that's how the numbering system is going to be our, what is it? It's a cheat sheet. It's a cheat code. It shows us what to do, but we don't know it like they did. You can just see right now, if you knew this, if you had it memorized and you could do this, yeah, all day long you'll find this. And of course, in this video, it's just an overview. That's a quick look at things. As I get into the series, we're going to get into that in very great detail. Right now, this is just an overview, kind of all these pieces fitting together in a, what? I'm not sure what you're doing. Okay, and that'll just come about. There's so many parts to this, honestly. And you're going to, it'll seem like it's very hard at first, but it's only because it's foreign and because we don't have it loaded in the right place. If it was in our memory and we knew how many times words were repeated, we could do this. Think of your own things that you're really good at. Maybe you're a engine person, cars or something. You know, how many head bolts, how many, lug nuts, how many whatever, all that kind of stuff. Maybe you knit and sew like my wife. She has all kinds of things that it's like she says, oh, I don't even know what that stuff is she's talking about. When we get into our own things, I've got into electronics. I can tell you, 7400 series low power Schottky chips and mil spec and different stuff like that. It's because we did that and we know it. They did that. They knew it. We have to understand that they're doing something deep that we can do, but we're not positioned to understand it because it's just not in our minds in the right place. Using the computer, you can see it. We're very detached from this. All right, if you're able to view your screen right now, what you're going to see is the entire book of Genesis on the, I've got it in a Word document here. This is the King James Version. And what I'm going to do, if you look up here, I'm going to take this first section. I'm going to contend that this area from the beginning, and we'll go through this here, from here to about right here, somewhere in here, is the first template, the human life template, from creation to the end of chapter 6. Chapter 7 is when the flood starts, and that starts the entire rest of it. What I'm going to do is we're going to zoom in on this gradually here. What I've got now is that first template, the human life template. It goes from Genesis, all the way up to chapter 6. And what I also have up here is the first part of chapter 7. And the reason I do is because there's an overlap. Chapter 7 starts the healing sequence if you were on a self-healing template. However, there's something happening in chapter 6 that sets it up. This is also right here what I've got where it's highlighted right here to the lower right. These are the two different callings where Noah was told. And the first one that came along to bring 2 pairs of everything, and in the second one to bring 7 pairs of clean and then 2 pairs. So the two of them, those two right there are the variations right at the beginning of the second one. And if I were at the second template, what I mean, the starting of the healing template. So if I was to say this first creation story here, I'm going to highlight it yellow. The second creation story goes all the way down to where they're naked, unashamed in the garden. I'll highlight that something different. Just make it light blue there. So this one is the one that ends up with the 7 said 3 times, where the 7-3 grid starts, and it lines up from here. However, when this one starts, this is the one. Oh, I've got it kind of small here. I'll get through this. All right. This one is going to be like that. Okay. So this matches this. This was added in. This was original, and this was original, I'm going to contend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of modification here, but first let's go take a look at this overlap between chapter 6 and chapter 7. Remembering up here the overlap between chapter 1 and chapter 2, there was where that it wasn't quite in the right place, where the 2 styles were, and one, the 7-day creation story was starting to appear in chapter 2. We're going to see that same thing happening right here. This is where I call it verbal stitching, where they've got an original story, then they're adding to it, but they're trying to leave everything original intact while making the new story seem like it belonged there all along. All right, let me try and describe that better. Okay, it looks to me like the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish. The Genesis was derived from there, but first it was smaller. And it's got some qualities in there in certain places that sound similar, but there's additions to Genesis that looks like they came about later. Different style, different author, and there's two templates in place that are there. There's a human life from creation all the way up to the flood. That's the human life cycle. Then from the flood all the way on is what's going to be called heroes' journeys, again and again, this inward path of cyclical healing. Except for one thing, there's a Babel story in there that has to happen. There's a transition. That's older too. That's going to factor in right here. But as far as those two templates, and when we go through the interpretation, if you stick with it, it's going to emerge. This is going to be an ongoing thing. It's just huge. It takes a while to see it. It does. All right. So the thing is then is that those two templates were there, and there was one style, and then right here where those kludge things, like how come the overlap right there, the chaptering is wrong? And what we're going to see right here is there's a chaptering variation too. We're going to find something that's even deeper. This thing needs to be 50 steps long. There's 50 chapters in Genesis. It's overstuffed. There's things that are added to it. All right, what I'm going to be doing now, I've changed the way this looks so we can get a better view of it here. I'm just going to blacken out temporarily the things that are, scale that down a little bit, the things that are added in. So right here, this first creation story from here all the way down to the 7 days, I'm just going to put that, I'm just going to cover that over right now. And this doesn't need to be colored. Then we've got chapter 3, the entire first sin. All of that is going to be left in place. And Cain, okay, oh, that's good. Cain avenging. Okay, this is the book of the generations of Adam. This is the first analog farm. If we were to, let me see where it ends down here. And Noah lived 500 years. I think if I go from, chapter 30, all the way up, verse 30, all the way up to, let me see, I'm not sure how this is going to work. Let's see how that would work. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. And all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them. Okay, so we're getting into the whole destruction area here. And somewhere right here, let's see. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart. And the Lord said, I shall destroy him. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and ate right there. Boom. Okay. This should have been the next chapter. Right there. So that shows where the overlap is, that the calling for Noah to come in is not logically happening at chapter 7. But at chapter 7, and the Lord said to Noah, come down, there's a second calling. So there's two things going on, and that's that verbal overlap I was talking about. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is to create a template with this human life template. We're kind of reverse engineering what's going on here. And right here in creation, what's going to happen is it's just setting up a number of conditions that are going on that are going to be a part of the story, how life begins and all of that, how we come about. It's pretty thick stuff to get into. I'm just going to call that the beginning, though. And at the end of the very first story right here, at the end of the very first creation story, and they were both naked, and the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. What you can see up here is, let's see, there's a point where, and the Lord made God, said it's not good that the man should be alone. I'll make him a helpmate. He'd make some other things, fowl of the air. Caused a deep sleep to fall on the man. Took the rib from the side, made the woman from there. Bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. Yeah, this is us. What's happening right here is this is the development of our inner awareness as we are living life as youngsters. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. This is us leaving from our beginnings and becoming just our individual selves. We're not really clinging to our wife and becoming one flesh. Does that really work? That's that's an instruction you're supposed to happen. How well does it work? Does it matter? Okay, sure it matters in the spiritual realm. This is about us. We want to be our conscious and our inner selves, our wife, and become one flesh. We want to be unified with ourselves. And they were both naked, and man and wife, and we're not ashamed. So we're in the garden. We had been put in the Garden of Eden by God, and we were uncovered by anything. Being naked in the spiritual world means, you're not ashamed. Okay, so this right here represents the time in our life where we're just little kids and have not yet started having life experiences. The moving on to first sin just represents moving on to life. All right, I started a new file here just called Human Life Template. So what we have, I'm just going to say, how do we word this here? We could continue to make modifications on this as we move along, but that 3-7 time right there, the naked, unashamed in the Garden of Eden, that's just happy kids. In the Garden of Eden. So the Garden of Eden is what? The Garden of Eden is not a physical location. It is a mental location. It's a spiritual location. We're happy. That's the Garden of Eden. We want to get back to there eventually. Naked, unashamed in the Garden of Eden. We've had some things set up before there, but this is the first step. Then we have first sin. So what happens on first sin? And I'm gonna put something up here. It's going to help out later. This is day 7. First sin is going to be day 8. We're going to call that 8. That's going to jump up there. Okay. This means we're becoming who we are. Development of memories and emotions. First sin, just really that's the first it. You lose your happiness. We no longer have our happy state once we begin to see life as not what we thought. Oh, people are that way. Oh, that kind of stuff happens? Oh, wow, I can't believe all that. Yeah, we lose that happy state. The development of the memories and the emotions is what happens next. We develop our memories and emotions, and we live through those memories and emotions. But how does that happen? All right, what I'm going to do is go back here. We're just going to glaze over some things. This is going to get caught in complete detail later on. But we're being told to leave the garden. We're being covered, which means we're no longer naked. So we're now being covered. This signifies that we now have something that we're hiding, or something that we're no longer happy. We've got something that's covering over our purity. Something we don't like, something that doesn't feel good. Maybe it's just hatred. Maybe we don't feel bad about it or ashamed, but we feel something else that's just not healthy, that's not good. So we're sent on our way, and then what happens? Let's see. He said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In sorrow you shall bring forth children. Right there is the cause and effect, the pain cycles. The woman, in this case, remember, that's the inner self. For anybody. It's not gender here. They're analogous terms meant to hold something in a mental hierarchy. The woman is the inner being. I will greatly multiply the sorrow and your conception. In sorrow you shall bring forth children. So bringing forth children represents every time something emerges from you. It's an offspring. Every time I scream and yell, or this cycles out of me again. Something happened once, it was not resolved, and every time I get triggered, boom, it's a painful exception, or something painful is happening right there. So we go back over here, and what I've done is added them in. So we started off naked, unashamed in the Garden of Eden. That's our pure state. That's unjudged life. That's before we begin to judge life. Then we add first sin, development of memories and emotions. And that we are now covered with some type of bad feelings as a result. We've been covered. And we're going to have cycles of pain as a result. The inner self is a product of the consciousness. Now let's go back and see what happens to the man. And I zoomed in a little bit better. That makes it easier for me too. Okay, greatly multiply your sorrow and conception. Okay, so every time we have something happen, it's going to continue to trigger. Cause and effect. The desire shall be to your husband. We're going to our inner self is going to continue to affect our consciousness taking from and giving to, and he shall rule over you. It will. Even if you're the one in charge doing bad, the husband's the fault of that, because the husband's the one that made the experience and put it in there. And unto Adam, okay, this is the consciousness now. Adam is your conscious awareness. Because you have hearkened unto the voice of your wife, and you ate of the tree which I commanded you, cursed is the ground for your sake, and sorrow you shall eat of it all the days of your life. So we're going to suffer the experience for what we've done. Remembering that if the woman consumption here is not that the subconscious went and did that. That was a conscious experience, and the way it was stored was into the woman. They've got it written like it sounds like if you don't unfold it, if you don't interpret it right, it sounds like the woman did a bad thing. The woman is a product of the man always. All right, so thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for your sake, and sorrow you shall eat of it all the days of your life. We're going to continue to pay the repercussions for what we are holding on to. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to you, and you shall eat of the herb of the field. So that represents what's coming from our garden, the garden of our life, thorns and thistles. We're going to continue to hurt because of the way we've judged life, unaware of it. We don't know it. We're just living life going, why is it this way? I hate it. I hate it. And then what's going to happen? Those are the thorns and the thistles coming from the garden of our life, and we're going to eat of the herb of the field. In this case, they're making it sound like the herb of the field is like something that is from the ground. It's not elevated. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you came, and you will return. Adam was a living of all thing. Let's see. So God made skins and clothed them. There we go. You're covered. The man has become like one of us. They sent him out. So they drove him out and blocked the way back. Okay, so why would they block the way back? You can't get back there. Yeah, once you've experienced life, you can never get back to that childhood bliss. You have to find a different way to the bliss. Now you have to do it with knowledge and not ignorance. Okay, so let's go back to the list and keep adding what just happened there. What's really happening is that we're being told that you're going to go off now and live life unaware. Just you're going to go off and have life experiences, making judgments about the earth and about the planet, and you're going to continue to pay the price for what's happened. You're going to reap thorns and thistles for what is there. Metaphor. Look at your life. Look back on it. Do you fit into this story? Not everybody does, but if you do and you go, yeah, I wasn't aware of it, but if I look back on it, I can see that that's what happened while I wasn't paying attention to it, because that's exactly how it works. We don't pay attention to it. We don't know. Nobody tells us this. All right, so I've got that template kind of made up to this point right now. We've now got our cycles of pain. The inner self is a product of the conscious. We figured we got there before, but we're going to continue to produce repeating bad experiences and accumulate more experiences while unaware of that. Yeah, unaware of that, unaware of them, unaware of the fact that we are accumulating. We're just living life blindly. We're not properly processing what's coming in and filtering it and ridding it. We're just absorbing it, taking it, storing it. That's what's happened. We were not taught to rid that stuff. We accumulate it, but then we have bad experience too. There's so much packed in there that really is the issue. We're going to begin living through that. First sin, it gets bigger and bigger. Okay, let's move on then to the next stages and see what happens. Next we have Cain and Abel. This is going to represent the division of ourselves. We can become, I'm a good kid, I'm a bad kid. What happens? In this case, remembering it's really, really old material, okay? We're also going to see something happen here. I want to talk about this. What is God? God is the higher awareness. We live from the higher awareness. The higher awareness creates somehow something for us. What we're going to see here at the end of the Cain and Abel story is that God is going to just disappear from the scene, and that we're going to go on from here and have life experiences. So at this point in time in our life, we're still little kids. We're still having the deja vu and all that kind of stuff. We've got things going on. But conditions are being set up on a template for how your life is going to work. You went and asked the guru, how's life? And he gives you a story, and you've got to extract yourself from this story. I'm a product of my life experiences and my judgments. I see. In a very thick story. All right, let's go back here. Again, I want to get this in greater detail later, so I'm just going to glaze over it here. We've got Cain and Abel. Cain offers from the ground, and Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Yeah, Abel, a keeper of the sheep, Cain, a tiller of the ground. So what happens here is that Cain kills Abel. Why would that be? What is the difference between the keeper of the sheep and the tiller of the ground? This is going to set up the way the stories work and how it's going to be functional. The Jewish apparently were very big on sacrifices. That was a big deal. If you could burn animals, then to God, things would go up in smoke. All that stuff is rising up. So the idea here that the sheep and the animals was a better thing than the tiller of the ground, what that really means is the tiller of the ground is like being stuck on the ground, like the serpent. You're being tied to the ground, or a tiller of the ground means that you're going to live unaware. You're not going to live from an elevated place mentally. You're going to be living from a non-elevated, from an unaware. I'm just going to live blindly along. In my life, I'm going to till the ground. I'm not going to keep the sheep. I'm going to keep my head down to the earth, not looking up to the higher awareness or God, okay? So that's what that whole thing represents there. He's gone. He gets rid of them. There's a story. There's more that goes on. At some point here, in verse 16, and Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. So right here is where the Lord disappears in the story in Genesis. God is completely gone from here on out until it's time to destroy the earth. Why would that be? This is the higher awareness. When we're born, we live through that, but we don't know it. We're little kids. We have no life experience. We don't know. You're just happy living. Yay. Who cares? You can kind of read minds a little bit, deja vu, all that stuff. You get all that. You feel the flow of something different there. But as you begin to live through life experiences, we begin to develop memories. And as that happens, we no longer live through that free higher awareness. We begin to live through the memories and our experiences. Of course, when you're young, you don't know that. You don't have the mental cognition to know it. It's necessary for the human to first live life and gather up experiences in order to have the thought processes that are going to be in place that allow us the capacity to understand what's going on and to realize we're living through the memories now. And that if we realize that we can get up to the higher awareness, that's where the return is. And what happens when it's time to flood out, when it's time for their calling, when it's time for something new to happen again, that's when the higher awareness returns. That's when God comes back. That's when we go, okay, I got to stop living through my memories. I've got to live through the higher awareness. That's the transition that's happening. That's why God disappeared and came back. You get to Abram and Sarai down there in 12 and on, you'll see the same thing happen. They have to go off and bad stuff happens, and God's not even there, has to come in later. That's the higher awareness. Otherwise, God would be pretty irresponsible, huh? Here, think about this story for a second. Let's put ourselves into this. The Eckhart Tolle one that he tells of his enlightenment or the beginning of it, his awakening. Had some work to do, but imagine him as a little kid having fun playing and then having a life where things are not okay. So he's living through his higher awareness, then he loses it. Goes through entire life, and he's sitting there at some point in time. He tells the story of just having this despairing, night, waking up turmoil, mind going through, arguing, asking himself, how can I even live with myself? And gradually becoming aware of the fact that there's something else in here. And somehow in this process of thinking, he's processing through and realizing that he's not his memories. I'm living through my memories. This is who I really am up here. That's the reemergence of the higher awareness right there. He went to sleep and said he woke up the next day and the world was completely changed because he became aware of the fact that I'm not my memories. All right, this video is going to get big, isn't it? Okay, the list is what here then? Basically, I've got that now we have accumulated more experiences while unaware of that. The self divides as we pursue worldly interest and take what comes along. We cease to be connected with the higher self. We live in the world unaware. Our thoughts are creating us. We're just living life blind. Okay, what happens next in the Bible? Okay, what we're going to see right as God leaves Cain, we've left that spot there. Cain knew his wife, built a city. Oh, Enoch. Enoch is going to be a network story. Enoch is a monomyth that branches off from right here. Enoch's name is repeated 10 times in Genesis. It's a good thing, but here's where it exits. We'll get back to that in detail later. We've got some things going on building the story. Okay, here we have the father of such that dwell in tents and of such that have cattle. We're just living normal lives. And his brother was Jabal, the father of all such as handle the harp and the organ. So life is going on at this point. This is us. This is playing out in our psyche. But remember, this is 3,500 years ago, and we can't get into the appreciation of how their minds are flowing with this material. They're analogous terms that are foreign to us. We use terms today. I do use a lot of analogous terms. I even know I frequently say I read a lot of stuff, but sometimes I struggle to collate it. You can take terms like that they make perfect sense to us, but they're analogous terms. I'm not really collating. It's a process that's something else. You take that term and put it back in their world, and they would go, I have no idea what they are talking about. Nothing whatsoever. We're kind of on the other side of that. But this represents our life, that we're just living our lives. You have your job, you're going along, you're having your marriage, day to day, things are happening, go to the gym, go fishing, go this day in, day out, something. This is that time in our life. And Adam knew his wife again, we're creating branches. Boy, you take this entire analog farm out, and what happens next is that Chapter 6, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. Okay, so let's back up here and just what did we just skip over here? I took that numbering system out. That's what that is right there. Remember that Adam analog farm. That's just going to be as time goes on. And let's put that in the template then. That's what this would represent, wouldn't it? Our early normal life unfolds and time goes by. Bye. Time goes by, whatever it is that you're doing in your life. Schools, college, that wasn't me, military, service, homeless, jobs, cashier, waitress, all of it. What are you doing for all those years? That's this time right here. And then what happens as we move along? Okay, so is that so what happens then? We get back into it, and 6 is just before the flood. This is the bad part right here, when destruction happens, or it needs to be destroyed. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Okay, who are the sons of God? Who are the daughters of men? Who are these that multiplied on the face of the earth? These are in the psyche. The daughters are who? The daughters are our qualities, our inner qualities that were at once pure. I love, I trust, I giggle, I laugh, I have all kinds of fun. They were the beautiful daughters that we all had. And the sons of God, the life's experiences that were powerful, saw that these were fair, and they took the wives of all that they chose. We lived life experiencing these powerful beings that had the power to create offspring and take that joy and turn it into tears. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for he is also flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. We'll leave the numbers out for now. God is leaving man. There's giants in the earth in those days, and also after, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Okay. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping things, and the fowls of the air. For it repenteth me that I have made them. I'm sorry I made it, but Noah found grace in the Lord. Okay, so this part right here is where our life has become, this is illustrating how our own life has become destroyed. These Nephilim, the giants, the things that are acting out of us, represent metaphorically the things that emerge, the offspring, those offspring that we're told that are going to get worse and worse. Yep, now they're this big. They are the Nephilim. They bare children to them, and the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. That's not a good thing. They were big, mighty, powerful things. You look back on it and go, I was so angry. I was so hard. I had to soften. I was right. I was hurt. I couldn't let it go. They were powerful. The higher awareness looks at yourself and says, you know what? I got to let that go. The evil is continuous. I'm angry. I can't let it go. It's not me being evil. It's the evil of the mind that is in turmoil, that has taken over our joy. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth. So we don't want to have, I'm sorry I did all those things and had those experiences, and now I am suffering the consequences of those. I'm going to have to change them. Okay, so right there, it is us deciding, what is it? We all have two lives. And the second one starts the moment we realize we only have one life, right here. I hate to put it that starkly, but kind of that's what's happening right here. This is the point where we're going to go, that's it. I have had it. I see where I came from. I can separate from this. I'm not going to be that. All right, so where are we on our human life template then? This is basically it from that entire template right there, the human life template, that we start out naked, unashamed in the Garden of Eden. I've left out a few things in here, like the cause and effect and cycles and whatnot. We'll imply those as we go, though. But basically, the story is going to be following this pattern. There's a pure state to start with, an unjudged life. Then there's a development of the memories and the emotions. And then we become covered with some type of bad feelings. Then we begin to experience cycles of pain. The inner self is a product of the conscious. This infers it's a mental path. We're going to continue to process or produce repeating bad experiences. As we get into a flow, uninterrupted, it continues to exacerbate along that same path. We're going to accumulate more experiences while unaware of that. The self divides as we pursue worldly interest and take what comes along. We cease to be connected with the higher self. We will live in the world unaware our thoughts are creating us. Our normal early life unfolds and time goes by. We have a separation from the higher awareness happens. Time goes by. It's shown in the lineage. The inner qualities have become corrupted. Giants or bad quality emerge as offspring, triggering from hurtful life experiences. But here we have the emergence of the higher awareness and the resolution to turn inward to the hurt memories in order to heal them. All right, how does that sound? Simple enough, right? Unusual. I had some doubling up in there. Actually, I've got that a couple of those taken out now. So basically then that would be a life story. You take that and create a template and say, here's how the human typically works. Take that template and go create a story. That is always there if you know how to turn inward with it. So that's the template for all creation stories. Not just this one. Some are not as detailed. I'm going to pull up something now, and let's take a look at something with the numbers in Genesis. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is after gathering up all the numbers from the analog farms, there's no 4 to be gathered anywhere. However, as I go through and I'm just doing my own kind of maneuvering through here and seeing what there all is, one of the things I realize as I'm realizing that they've created a number pile that all mean pure state and first sin and things like that, and then they're repeating the words throughout the story enough times to put it into the category of a good or a bad or something like that, I realize, oh boy, that's clever. I'm going to start looking for things. So naked was one of them, and we did that already, the nakedness, didn't we? If I go naked by itself, though, it's 9. So there's nakedness was said 5 times, and those 5 times were all about, there was 3 times with Noah, and then way down with Joseph, 2 down there. But nakedness being said 5 times in Genesis means that it is a good thing. It's desirable to be naked because in the spiritual world, that means I'm uncovered. That's why Noah was naked after the flood. That's why we were naked after purging things out. You're uncovered from that. However, Then, where were the other ones, the naked by themselves? Because 9 is, I look at that and go, well, 5 is a good number, but 9, so the 9 is one that I look at and I'm kind of uncertain of. Sometimes I think it's okay. It has been gathered, but its use is interesting. But I also wonder why the words are like this. Anyway, as I go take a closer look, what I realize is that these 4 naked are all in part of the old story. And what I mean by old story, if you took out that the first creation story and just second creation and then into first sin, all that right there, that's where it comes from. That the original Genesis that has the old flow verbiage to it. Naked, the 4 times, comes from there. The nakedness 5 times comes from a different location, a different template. Here's another one when we get into the story of Babel. If you start looking through words in here, let's take a look at something. Language. Well, that's one of the words. How many times does it appear? It not only appears 4 times exactly, but it only appears right here in this one. In all of Genesis, it only appears right here in this story in this Babel story. The Babel story is original. It has the same flow as the first one. It does step down into a lineage down here, but up in the Babel story itself, yeah. So I look at things like that and go, I don't know why there are 4 Pete's in there. I'm not quite sure. All right, what I've got up next here is the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish. And if we look through it here very quickly, I'm just going to show you a couple of things. I'm not going to do an interpretation on this. I want to do a word count. I want to show you some numbering sequencing that they're doing previous to Genesis. But there are things in here like right in the beginning, it was then that the first being Apsu, who was their source, that's the god, and the progenitor Tiamat, the mother who gave birth to all. What does Genesis have? And Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. We've got down here, that generation of gods would gather together for wild revels. These are gods that went crazy and were just being too loud and raucous. So they proved bothersome to Tiamat, that's the inner self, for their hullabaloo echoed. All this commotion proved unsettling to Tiamat's inner being. That's us. That's our inner being, our inner being's inner being. And she was bothered by all their activity within Anderuna. That's the meeting place of the gods, the mind. And there was nothing Apsu could do to mitigate their carousing. But there was nothing Tiamat would say to quiet them down. And no matter how troublesome their conduct became to her, regardless of how rowdy things were, she just put up with it. Okay, that is going to parallel chapter 6 in Genesis, where the gods and the giants, the men of old, all that kind of stuff. This is what needs to be destroyed. There's this giant corruption. In this case, the way it's represented, you would say, well, why would they be gods? That's just crazy. And the way that, if you think about it, your early qualities that you have to resolve were so powerful, you couldn't stop them. They were in charge when they acted out. So they got God status. They weren't the big god, but every time it was their turn to act, they became the god at that time. So that's what needs to be destroyed. The same thing happens in both stories, but it's kind of different verbiage. I mean, seriously, a Christian will say, you know what, there were no gods to begin with. And you would ask them, what are the sons of God that came down and impregnated the beautiful daughters of men? Come on, unwrap it. Look for what's the same in those stories, not what's different. Look for the concepts that are the same and make sure they go in the mind. Okay, that having been said, let's look at some numbers here. Okay, what I'm going to do is the same thing as what I do with Genesis, is just grab a name and ask how many times it's repeated, names or words. All right, so as I go through and start looking at things, one thing I notice is that the name 7 or the word 7 has been repeated 3 times. It looks like a 3-7 grid almost, doesn't it? But demon, Babylon, Ashara are all repeated exactly 4 times. 3 is repeated 5 times. That would match up with the Jewish grid. We've got 7th saying 1 time, shelter 3 times, the peak 3 times. Here's some fun stuff. Lady Huber, she is the evil force. Look, number 8. I'm going to show you something down here. Marduk is, first back up, fate, King U, 17. 17 is how many times Sarai's name is repeated. Marduk, 41 times. Marduk's name is said exactly 41 times here. Marduk is the called hero. We get into Genesis, and we're going to see again, I think it's hard to put it all together, but if you see on this list right here, the numbers that are green, those are the ones that have been collected in the analog farms. You see the 800 and 900, they're not used elsewhere. They were only used to go out and gather up other numbers. But you can see what we've got there, the 1, 3, 4, 7, the 5, 7, 10, 12, 15, 17, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 800, 900. But then what we see from day 7, day 3, that the first sin would be day 8. That's the same day that you would have circumcision, right? Day 8 is a step. It's one step from 7. It goes from 7 to a pure state to 8 to, okay, now I'm not pure. 17 pure, 18, oh, now I'm not pure. 20 I'm pure, oh, 21, now I'm not pure. I don't think that continues on very high because of our 41 count with Noah and with Marduk and other places later on in the Bible. It shows the 41 shows up in other places all the way down into Christian works. But these numbers right here, then, if something is repeated this amount of times, 8 or 18 or 21, then that means that it's going to be bad. So when Lady Huber's name is repeated 8 times, yeah, that's exactly right. If we were to go look at Sodom in Genesis, it is repeated 21 times. So those are being held on this list right here. It's really that tight. Okay, so what becomes evident at some point is that the numbers are so consistent and what they're doing is so consistent that it isn't random. It's not an accident. It's not a coincidence what they're doing. It's a very patterned, established amount. They're repeating words a very specific amount of times all over, not just a couple of them. They're being very careful about, it looks like all of them. Well, that's pretty intense, isn't it? But it also appears to me as though there is a numbering system that is in place in Genesis that, if you look deep enough, you see that it was in place prior to Genesis. It was the same thing was in place in the Babylonian material. So the Jews are borrowing a lot more than the creation story, but they're also using a pattern of teaching in the background of maintaining the template in a larger scale. There's something that is shared in common among people. People that don't like each other and hate each other, you're on the outside. All right, at this point, I believe that there is something that is definitely demonstrable. It takes some analysis and it takes some different kind of thinking. And you really have to get out of the box of this is true or it's not true. It's either history or it's baloney. There's something different. There's a framework of human life and of a cycle of something that a person can interact with, that the stories are framed upon. Whether the stories are true or not, I mean, I hope not, honestly. I hope when we get down into Abram and Sarai and Abraham and Sarah and Lot and his daughters and all that, no, I wouldn't want those stories to be historical. I would not. I will interpret them, though, and they will be just fine, but they won't mean what you think they do. It's about something in my whole makeup. It's not about my real daughters. Yeah. Whew. All right, this video got really big. You see that if you made it this far, you see there's just too many parts. It's really hard to see it all. And in this video, I think I probably tried to just encompass a big overall picture, the connection between the Babylonian material, the Genesis material, other Abrahamic material. Right now, let's just stick with Genesis. And the numbering pattern and the idea that there's something added into Genesis and that there's a couple of anomalous overlaps in there right where the templates would be, and that you can see all of that stuff that makes you go, well, maybe there's something to it. Okay. I don't know what to do on the next video. What I need to do is start focusing in now on just really interpreting Genesis. Focus on that, starting with right up in the beginning. This was just a quick glaze over. We need to get deeper into it. Okay. Hope the video was fun and interesting. And questions, comments. See you in the next video.